Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, and today I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Troy Anderson and the Federation Press in Australia. Troy's written a new edition now of his excellent book Commonwealth Criminal Law, and I'm delighted to review it. He's kindly sent the book to me, and I will show you the book in a moment. Elizabeth and I talked about the book, and we've come up with this review, the title of which is Criminal Law in Australia, the definitive text for comparative lawyers. And that's really what it's about. I know it's called Commonwealth Criminal Law, but it gives you a flavour of where we are today with the criminal justice process as it might appear in other parts of the world, bearing in mind what we gave to other parts of the world with the expansion of the common law some centuries ago now. Let's have a look at the book first of all. It's a red cover, very much part of the house style of the Federation Press. Very pleased with it, I have to say. There's the spine, there's nothing on the back, just a red cover. Now the book is a hardback, of course. It doesn't run to a particularly large number of pages, 325. The actual index is relatively small, and it's by paragraph numbering. The paper is slightly different because it again comes from Australia, this book, and it's a rather more glossy paper used. There's the reviews of the previous edition, and Troy has very kindly signed that for me. It's very good of him. And there's the front. There's a foreword, of course, by the Honourable Justice Geoffrey Bellew to give us some information. There's the front of it there, and then that's the actual foreword there from Judge Bellew. Then we get, and that's dated June 2018 from Sydney. And the contents section, you can see the structure of it very clearly. Starts off an overview of Commonwealth criminal law, then running through general principles, offences, then various other types of offence, and so forth, all the way through. And then after that, there are 10 chapters in total. Sentencing, of course, always there. It has the logical structure of any criminal law book, and then there's extradition at the end. And then there's a preface from Troy, again dated June, updated to reflect recent amendments to the law and schedule of recent case law. So basically it's an updating job. And then you've got acknowledgements there, and then you've got the case law itself there. Then some, obviously, a lot of statutes. Now, I, for one, am not familiar with quite a lot of areas of this particular practice, but the book itself, I think, is very interesting. What I did notice is with the table of statutes, is the large number, because in fact we are moving very much, I think, in many jurisdictions towards full codification, and I think that will happen actually in this century. Now, an overview of Commonwealth criminal law, there we go, is the start-off point. The purpose of this chapter is to explain something of the unique character of Commonwealth criminal law, the relationship it has with state and territory laws, and the principal organisations that enforce it. And then you can see the paragraph numbering running all the way through. Now, I've read that out because I think that's an important point to make, because in terms of jurisprudence as well as anything else, about the way in which the criminal law has been adopted and adapted in different jurisdictions. And as we run through, you can see there's footnoting as well all the way through with the paragraph numbering. Well, what has been set out here, I think, has been very important, and from my perspective as a member of the Bar of England and Wales, I've certainly found this book very interesting, really looking at it from the point of view of a comparison, if you like, of how, and to see which bits may possibly have an effect here, because at the moment, I have to say, our criminal justice system in England and Wales needs an overhaul. But that's been said by the editors of the Criminal Law Review and a lot of other people academically for a long time. Let me talk about the book. It's from Down Under, where failing to vote is a prosecutable offence, and what comes from Australia is the new edition of this Commonwealth Criminal Law publication by Troy Anderson, now in the second edition. As I say, it's already established as a first point of reference in this area of law, and the new edition will be welcomed, we think, by criminal practitioners in Australia and more than probably in other Commonwealth common law jurisdictions. That, of course, is within the Commonwealth. Comparative lawyers, as I've indicated, especially those whose practice extends to or involves matters relating to Australia, will no doubt consider it as a valuable acquisition, and rightly so. It's not a big book, but there's a lot of detail in it. It never hurts, of course, in terms of jurisprudence, certainly, to understand the parallels and the similarities as well as the differences in criminal law between one common law jurisdiction and another. And I must say, when I think back to the history of the common law, it's really fascinating to see how it's developed so far. I mean, I don't know what direction it will go in the longer term, but I do still believe, and always have done, that the common law is the greatest system of law ever really devised, and it's a tribute to the Commonwealth countries and all the other states that actually, including the United States of America, who've actually taken the common law on board. Now, this publication comes to us from the Federation Press, and the second edition will certainly replicate the success of the first edition, which came out in 2014. It's equally accessible now, of course, and readable, and has been meticulously updated, as Troy indicates at the front of the book. Writing from Sydney, then, Troy, who's a barrister of the Supreme Court of New South Wales, who has also qualified as a solicitor. Remember, they have a dual system there, as they do in Canada. Clarifies the book's title, explaining that said title could easily have been Federal Criminal Law for reasons detailed in the text. And of course, that's fascinating in its own right because of the relationship between the federal structure and the states or the territories. You can understand that there are different approaches, which of course we don't have in England and Wales. But of course in the UK we have the England and Wales jurisdiction, England and Wales. We then have the Scotland jurisdiction. We have the Northern Ireland jurisdiction. So you can see again there are similarities. The important thing, the book consistently uses the term Commonwealth, although the two terms, of course, may be used interchangeably. Speaking of differences that pop up in different common law jurisdictions, there are at least a couple of them in Australian law that, although quite well known, are nonetheless startling. Now, I'm using the word Australian law here. I hope you don't mind, but that's the way I probably perceive it to be, because that's the way it will go. Let's talk about that in the longer term. That's clearly what you will have in the longer term, because it'll be your own law. Obviously, it'll be based on what we've given you, but at the same time, that's the basis of what you will have. So, having started off, failing to vote is one area which is fascinating. Having just had a bruising election campaign here in London in 2018, and having lost, I did, bearing in mind we had a very high turnout. This is for local elections, where in fact the turnout's about just under 60%. It's highest in the country, and in fact where I stood, in the general election, it was the highest turnout in the country, just under 80%. But we're talking here about people who don't vote, though of course I would point out that they are prosecuted less frequently now in Australia. Failing to participate in a referendum, of course, is another one that has a sanction. Now, as I said, when we talked about this on the street to people, they weren't basically one or two people said, well, everybody should be forced to vote. And a lot of other people said no, because the view is you knock on the door and they tell you to go away. I'm not interested. You're all the same, not interested. That is expressing a view in its own way. So I'm afraid from a jurisprudential and philosophical point of view, I think that fails to make a sale. But that's my personal point of view. Now, take it that all you stubborn UK citizens who can't or don't or won't vote, or who will whinge about the results of a referendum in which they have not participated, may like to consider that, especially bearing in mind that Brexit Day is 6 months away, and I'm not going to say any more. Getting back to the book, all this aside, the book has become a must-have for anyone needing to enhance their understanding of the ins and outs of the Australian criminal law system. And I mentioned the business about failing to vote because that's a stark difference between what we have here and what is there. And it's one that people can relate to. And of course, there are a wide range of other offences I haven't even gone into, which are covered, most falling under almost a dozen categories similar to what we have, from fraud and taxation offences to, for example, counter-terrorism, human trafficking, child exploitation, cybercrime, and of course many more. All the usual suspects are there, and as I've always said, and my sadness about leaving the EU is that we've tried to unify our approach against a common enemy, which in this case is crime. And it is always useful to have some sort of consistency in the approach to identifying the crimes and dealing with them. But that's possibly again for the future. Let me conclude by going on and saying, as should be apparent, the law in these areas continues to evolve. And as mentioned by Geoffrey Bellew in the foreword, Troy has gone to great lengths to ensure that legislative and related changes which have become operative since the first edition have been fully addressed. And that's obviously one of the reasons why the new edition has come out. And another important point here is that the author's complete revision and expansion of the content relating to sentencing and related issues has also been looked at. So definitely this logically organised legal text, that's what it is, with its wealth of references, will be, I think, of immense benefit to busy practitioners, obviously mainly in Australia. There's also been called an essential addition to the library of any practitioner. Of course, in Australia that is. And certainly should generate, I think, a great deal of interest elsewhere, particularly amongst international lawyers. And I looked at this primarily from the international jurist point of view, bearing in mind what I thought of where we are in English criminal law at the moment, and looking at the way this is developing within, if you like, the Commonwealth itself. Now, the publication date is cited at 2018, which that's June time 2018. Let's have a look at the book again. There it is. There's the front, a nice spine. It's a heavy book actually, but that's because of the real excellence of the quality of the paper. If I just open it in the middle, offences under the Corporations Act 2001, and then you can see the structure. So I think, bearing in mind that the book only runs to some 320 odd pages, you've got a great deal of information here, and of course you've got the case law references and the statutory references as well. Corporate criminal liability. As I say, although sometimes the wording might be slightly different, money laundering and the proceeds of crime, we have the same things here. And as I've often said to people when I've been abroad and come back, it doesn't matter which country you go to, you still have the same problems. And it's basically the same with the law. I'd like to thank Troy very much for sending it to me. Thank you for your letter. And I'm delighted to review this, and so is Elizabeth. We were touched that you sent it to us, and thank you so much. Good luck with it all, and thank you also to Federation Press for publishing it. Bye-bye.